think we're going to need to resuscitate Tootsie. He's still on the floor.
Did Jesus actually exist? Paul from the DRC writes into us and he wants to know, how can you build an entire worldview around a mythical figure who never even existed? Question mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark.
Does Paul really exist?
Paul exists. I'm assuming it could be a pseudonym, but I mean...
Okay.
It's right there, yeah.
I'm just checking, man.
Yeah, I see that. Yeah, Paul does exist.
So read that question again.
Paul from the DRC writes in...
next week.
Yeah.
He wants to know, how can we build our entire worldview around a mythical figure who never even existed?
Mythical figure that never existed.
Yeah.
Wow. Those are strong words.
These are the kinds of questions that we deal with here on Ask One. These are straight answers to difficult questions around the Christian faith. And I thought it would be a good idea to, this whole episode for this week, to discuss this. Did Jesus actually exist? I don't know if you guys get asked that question a lot.
Can we just acknowledge first and foremost that there are many, many people who think that way. But I don't know if you've encountered it.
Definitely.
Yeah. People believe that Jesus is just a fairy tale kind of
Story.
person who never really existed.
Another Harry Potter kind of dude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been told that the Bible should be called the Jerusalem fairy tales.
What?
Yeah. That
Wow.
Jesus was a mythical figure. But I feel this question kind of has two elements to it, because first of all, we need to prove that Jesus existed historically. But he wasn't just an historical figure. Then we got to get into the metaphysical side of Jesus. Like, is he who he said he was? Is he the Son of God?
Yeah.
Because that's really the burning question.
Yeah.
But before we get there, we need to be able to dispel questions like, how can you believe a mythical figure?
His very existence, yeah.
I mean, just to give you a sense, I'm on the Wikipedia page for the
wow.
Christ myth theory. That's about as mainstream as, grassroots as you get.
Yeah.
And one of the first lines here, it says, in modern scholarship, the Christ myth theory is a fringe theory not supported by any tenured specialists. So I think it's important to state that, because some people, some atheists, and some people who are not necessarily atheists, but who are not steeped in a biblical worldview and Christianity, do not know much about that kind of thing, assume that the Jesus story is a kind of a myth or something. And the fact is that is simply not true. There is no reputable scholar in the world who holds to that.
Yeah.
All of them start with the idea that Jesus was a historical figure. So that should be our starting point. That is generally accepted by reputable scholars.
Yeah. Well, I know what you're saying. Based on the evidence, if you're going to discredit the existence of Jesus, we would have to discredit so many figures, historical figures, that we take as granted. People that we learn about in books, we would have to discredit a lot of them.
Well, it's often been said that there's more historical evidence for the life of Jesus than there is for that of Napoleon Bonaparte.
I like that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't the fact that even our measurement of time itself, we talk about before Christ and then AD, Anno Domini, so the whole fact of there is a period before Christ, I think knowing how we as humanity love science so much, it would be kind of silly to imagine that we would base our measurement on time on something or someone that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So that starting point already for me is a flawed one. I think he existed. It's pretty plain.
Yeah.
Even by things that we see every day.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do much digging to be able to discredit that. So, okay, let's assume, Paul, if you're listening to us, thank you for writing in. We appreciate you taking the time.
Did you say from where in the Congo?
No, he just said it was just from DRC.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. In future, if any of you do write into us, please be quite specific so that we can direct this straight at you.
Yeah.
TJ is particularly.
I just wanted to know if he's from Kinshasa or Lubumbashi, because yeah.
Well,
I'm
maybe
not bragging.
Paul, if you're listening, please write back to us.
That's important information.
It's important information.
If you are listening to us, please write back. We want to know how you feel about this. Actually, anybody who's listening to us, if you're listening and you've got a question or you'd like to comment or you'd like to contribute in any way, please get hold of us on facebook.com/ask1. We want your questions. This whole show is based on a question that came from one of you. So thank you for that, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, so Jesus existed.
Totally.
Cool.
There's no argument there.
Is that it for today then?
Coffee's on me, guys. Let's go.
All right, so I see donuts on the table.
Okay, well, let me throw something out there that many people have asked me. They look at other historical sources and they say, well, I trust those. And then they look at the Bible and say, well, I mean, that's a religious text.
But he's not only mentioned in the Bible. I mean, even Islamic texts, the Quran, he's mentioned, they talk about Jesus being crucified.
Yeah.
They say that he didn't really die, he just looked like he died, but even they say that he existed. They don't discredit his existence, they discredit what he said. The Talmud says the same thing.
True.
They discredit what he did, they don't discredit that he existed. So even religions that have a vested interest in disproving Christianity can't disprove. So he doesn't just appear in the Bible.
True.
Yeah.
But it irks me that people that they don't consider the evidence from the Bible as well. Because the fact that it's a religious text, and I put that in in quotation marks, the fact that it's a religious text, that's neither here nor there. Because I mean, the Bible itself is just. Even if you're not a Christian, the Bible is just a collection of books, a collection of documents, especially the New Testament. This is a collection of documents that were written and passed around by people very soon after the events that's actually described. And it was passed around so much that it was ultimately accepted as authoritative. And so before the Bible, before the New Testament was a religious text, it was a historical text, right? It's an account of things that happened. And sure, you can argue that there are embellishment and all kinds of other things, but you can't escape the fact that what you're dealing with is a bunch of accounts written down by people who experienced them. So from that perspective, the New Testament, even if you don't believe in the Bible as the Word of God, the New Testament is a collection of historical documents that talk about Jesus Christ.
In saying that though, Heinz, I think, let me play devil's advocate for a moment here and say, it's very difficult. I think, the human being is complex in the sense that in as much as we are thinking beings, we're also very emotional, and
you're an emotional guy, right, TJ?
Yeah, I've been known to, and I've garnered several nicknames for being the emotional guy. But that's for another show. So I think it is difficult for people to look past the fact that the book is a religious text, even if it stands, as an integrous historical text. It's very difficult, particularly if you've had certain experiences of religion. A lot of people have problems with the idea of organized religion. One could talk about what religion has done, the evils that religion has done in the name of religion. So I think it's very difficult, and I think that's why conversations like this are very important, where we can say there is, even though you've had bad experiences of ABC, just look at it from a very practical point of view. And we encourage the questions. We're not afraid of the questions because we need to constantly be digging deeper. So even this conversation about did Jesus exist, we need to peel off the emotions and just look at things for what they are. Get to the facts. Because
at the end of the day, the facts don't care about your feelings. Everybody's had a bad experience on something. It doesn't negate the fact that fact is fact.
And to be perfectly honest, I get very how can I put this? I get very worried when Christians don't interrogate these things for themselves. Like, you shouldn't be believing this stuff just because you heard it. You should believe it because you have investigated it. And there's a time when you come to Christ, when you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, that's a moment. But once and that's something that the Spirit does in your heart, and it's something bigger than just this rational decision that you make. But once you've done so, it's your responsibility to go and read about these things, to really question them, to dig in deep and know why you believe what you believe.
Yes.
I think that's also important. And the reason I say that is because when you really, really do that, these facts stand up. These facts are borne out.
Yeah.
So you can't just come with a wishy-washy, it's a myth kind of argument. You have to come with the facts.
Yes.
And the facts are verifiable. The facts are historical.
Yeah. I find that a very common mistake that people have when they come into a debate around the subject is the person coming to you, it doesn't seem to understand that the burden of evidence rests on both parties. You can't just come into an argument and say that's not true. You need to be able to back it up and say that's not true because of X, Y, and Z, and then you can have a debate, and the burden of proof lies with both parties. But atheists and people who doubt, skeptics, people who question these things seem to forget that. And it's like they come into the argument and just saying that's not true because it's just not true is like a valid argument. So, but that's kind of the essence of the show, isn't it? That's why we do this show, is to interrogate Christianity. It's not going to fall over. Christianity isn't built on lies. It's not, and it's not scared of being interrogated. The Bible says, question these things.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to then what Heinz was saying, that this is if you're questioning stuff like this, it's an opportunity for you to take it upon yourself. To read the Bible, to investigate it, to learn it yourself, to compare scriptures, to just get your own perspective of everything. Because at the end of the day, if you believe in the Word of God, then you believe in the Son of God. Yeah. And that's when everything would unfold to you.
Yeah,
that's good.
And it's good to now and then just to go read up about just to go refresh your memory on these facts. And it's part of the reason why we did the show. I mean, all of us had to go and once again just dig in a little deeper and go and read about these things again. And I think that's important from time to time to do that, to be able to answer for your faith.
So then, I think having sort of established that foundation, are we then saying we're moving past the discussion about whether Jesus existed to the deeper question of who he said he was? Or do we still need to prove a few things? I don't know.
I think now is the time. I'm kind of feeling it.
I do think there's more that you can say about Jesus as a historical figure.
Okay.
Because it's not just dependent on what you read in the Bible, what you read in the four Gospels and beyond that. There are other historians who've mentioned Jesus in the writings. I think we should probably mention just one or two of those as well. Just
cool.
Okay, I'm going to take the low-hanging fruit. Josephus and what's his name? Tychicus.
That is the lowest hanging fruit I've ever heard. I'm sorry that I didn't take it myself.
Like that,
Wow.
I mean, Josephus
You missed your opportunity there.
He was a Roman historian.
I really did. It was on the tip of my tongue.
Sorry, I know. I couldn't remember the other guys, so I just went for the simple.
I could see Mel reaching
Mel was
for
like,
that
my
moment.
eyes, that was my
It was a
point.
moment, and you just grabbed it.
Oh,
Sorry.
bother.
Okay, Mel, I'll tell you what. You read the quote by Josephus. So Josephus refers to Jesus twice. The second
I'm
time
not
is
even
more
going to
of
be
a...
able to read it.
I hope you can.
If it's got a name
Okay, Mel,
like
this is your one thing.
Josephus.
So Josephus refers to Jesus twice. Once he refers to him as the brother of James, the Christ. I just want to get the quote right. The brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. He talks about James. He calls him the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. But the main quote that we often read about is this one.
Okay, this is what I'm going to read. Fantastic. Here we go. About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man, for he wrought surprising feats. He was the Christ. When Pilate condemned him to be crucified, those who had come to love him did not give up their affection for him. On the third day he appeared, restored to life, and the tribe of Christians has not disappeared. Ta-da.
That is pretty ringing endorsement if there's ever been one.
Yeah, so this is a first century Jewish historian just writing about some other events, and he mentions Jesus. You want to read the Tacitus one as well?
Yes,
Shall we? So let's get Tacitus. He's AD 64, so he wrote, Nero fastened the guilt on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out, not only in Judea, the first source of the evil, but even in Rome. So that's a reference to Jesus, and then that mischievous superstition talks about, obviously the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and what people believed about Jesus even at that early stage.
Yeah.
Whoa!
Sorry,
This must be a
I just
good
got really
point.
choked up.
Yeah.
I'm also quite an emotional.
Excited, yeah.
I'm also quite an emotional person. I love how please understand where I'm coming from, but I love how the Romans called it an evil. Because it was a direct attack on their kingdom.
Yeah.
And who's left standing?
Yeah.
Sucks to be you, Rome.
Something else that I looked up, the disciples, and I know this is like a different layer altogether.
Yeah.
This is not about maybe Jesus existing, but the disciples existing, some of which were martyred. The thing that I find quite interesting about that is if these guys actually existed, the disciples, the apostles, so I'm talking about, if they existed, they were willing to die.
Yeah.
A logical, reasonable human being wouldn't be willing to die for something that they didn't know was real. Also, upon that, they actually were with Jesus. They walked with Jesus, and they went to various places and preached the gospel and were consequently killed. So you've got to question, if there's evidence, which I'm hoping someone else who's more intelligent than me in the room who'll be able to say, yes, actually there is evidence that the disciples existed, which apparently scholars have written about that who aren't necessarily religious as well. That's almost adds a layer upon the story or the argument that Jesus actually existed. And if there's so many layers to this, it's kind of going, well, someone's obviously really had something, that they were going to benefit from this if they wanted to create this really intricate story, an elaborate story, that actually now there's another layer of evidence, well, the disciples existed as well, who were willing to die. I don't know. I just think it's all too... It all points in that direction.
I quite like what you're saying. I'm thinking now of the whole thing about the power of numbers. There's power in numbers, We're sort of all familiar with this high-profile court case. I won't mention the name of the person, but we'll know when I say it. A high-profile court case that's going on where a number of people have accused the top celebrity of having abused them several years ago, whatever. Now, if one person had said it... Hey?
Which one?
Yeah,
There's
you're
been
right.
a few of those.
You could, you're right. Anyway, let's for argument's sake say one person said... this person did this to me. Everyone would sort of have the right to say, we don't really trust this person. But now, if they're like 5, 20, 25 people saying,
the same thing.
Wait a minute, this actually happened to me as well, it becomes more difficult to disprove that. And I think that's the same thing that Mel is saying. Like, these disciples were quite a number of people, and this message started to spread that this guy is real and this is what he's done. So there is power in numbers.
That's really cool.
The testimony of numbers.
There really is power in numbers. And another way to think about that is Mel mentioned the disciples, the apostles, really.
Yeah.
And that's one group of people. Look at it, the bigger picture. Look at the arising of the church.
Yeah.
There's no way to account for the arisal of the church without referencing life, death, and resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
I mean, it's think about it. This moment where Jesus is crucified.
Yeah.
that is a smashing defeat, right? There were quite a few figures in the first century and during that, around that time that professed to be messiahs of one form or another. So that's nothing new. And all of them came to the same end, right? They died. Yeah. And Jesus came to that end as well. He died. But then there's this incredible event that's unparalleled in history. And the only way that you can account for, what's it today, 1 billion people.
Almost 2.
Yes. Yeah. The only way that you can account for that, for the birth of the church, is by looking at the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There's no other way to account for it. There is no other way.
Yeah. Unless 2 billion people are loony.
Which is highly unlikely. An argument that I encounter is that religion is probably one of the best businesses to be in. But when you think about what you're talking about, Heinz, when the church foundation was laid, these guys were not there was no personal gain in it for them. No. There was, you either lived in secrecy or you died.
Exactly.
That was it. So there wasn't,
but
there
also,
was no
and
reason for them.
Importantly, there was no time for legends and embellishments to develop around these accounts. So you're talking about a church that was birthed in Jerusalem during the time, like around this time that Jesus was crucified and rose again. So think about this, Leon. You can't go spread some. Let's pretend. So our president in South Africa is Jacob Zuma. Let's pretend he died, and then you went around Cape Town telling people that he rose again. Heaven forbid. but you would not be able to do that, right? You would not be able to do that because there are other people around you who were around when this happened and they know what happened.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And in the same way, you see in first century Jerusalem, these guys are sharing the story of Jesus, talking about what's happened, and it would have been very easy for people just to go, dude, what are you talking about? His grave's over there. He's like, and they can't do that.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, we see Roman authorities come up with a conspiracy theory to try and explain what happened to maybe the disciples stole it. But the same people died later on for their belief.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
Good point.
On that, I mean, if a Roman soldier had fallen asleep on duty, not just him would be dead, his family would be killed. Yeah. So there is no way on earth that 2 Roman soldiers, highly trained Roman soldiers, fell asleep and let some Hebrew boys come and take a body out of a grave. That just didn't happen.
Yeah. And this is where what TJ said becomes important, because when you talk about the life, death, resurrection of Jesus, and I think we're in a later episode, we're going to look specifically at the resurrection. But when you look at this, it's layer upon layer upon layer of evidence. It's not, you're not building your case on a single thing,
strand.
Single event, a single. You're building it on layer upon layer upon layer of evidence. There's no way around it, really. The only way around it is to come up with conspiracy theories, and that's all that people have been able to do over time. When it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, some guys have said, maybe they come up with the swoon theory, right? Maybe Jesus was just kind of out of it and he didn't really die and then he woke up later. The only way that they can explain these things is by coming up with conspiracy. And that to me is why I believe what I believe, because it's not built on a single strand of evidence. It's built on layer upon layer of evidence.
Yeah. And the story hasn't changed. I mean, you get cults, offshoots of the truth, but the story hasn't changed. So if you're listening, please drop us a line. Send us a question or let us know your thoughts on the topic. You can get hold of us on facebook.com/ask1.
Ask one. Sorry, I forgot that.
That is dope.
I forgot that. I'm very sorry about that. Please don't fire me.
I sort of want to bring it in a little bit now, where we've spoken about the evidence, we've spoken about the group, but I don't think that even if somebody came up with a conspiracy theory, they came up with some sort of theory that somehow discredited everything that we've just said, you still have the personal revelation of Jesus within each Christian's life. And each one of us can attest to the reality of Jesus because he is real to us in our lives. We've seen him work, we've felt his presence. And that individual testimony, I think, is probably the most powerful, because you can't argue somebody's testimony.
Yeah.
You know, if somebody's going to say, "Oh, okay, well, Jesus is real to you, but he's not real to me," that's ridiculous. You can't. Jesus is as real to me as anybody else that I've ever met. So the power of a personal testimony, you can't really argue that.
It is subjective, though.
I would like to know how.
Well, no. I'm not discounting your argument. I'm just saying, like, that's a challenge to that kind of proof. It's like people saying, "Well, yeah, sure, I believe that." I don't know what can I think.
It could have been
can't think of an
coincidence.
example now.
I believe Apple is better than.
I believe Apple is better than Android. It's like, yeah, cool. That's
Look at Leon's face. I did that intentionally. You know that. Look at Leon.
Kind of
Opening up a can of worms. Yes.
That's not
Wrong-
even the same
wrong
thing.
example.
Wanted to get excitement going.
No,
in
I
the
grant
room.
you
That's
that.
all.
I grant you that. But
Yeah.
it is a challenge to some people when we say, "I believe in Jesus because he's real to me."
Yeah, but you can't. Then it becomes a subjective argument. It can't be an objective argument, because that person cannot discredit what my experience has been. They can say they don't believe it because of X, Y, and Z, but that's their opinion. You can't. And if we're talking objective proof, you may not like what I'm saying. I'm not you, the person that I'm explaining myself to. Or maybe you, I don't know.
fine.
But they cannot discredit my experience. They can only dislike it and ignore it.
Yeah, true.
So then the onus is on them. They can't sort of fall back on any kind of scientific, intellectual high ground. They have to just say, "Well, I don't agree with that."
Well, I kind of like the idea of what we believe being based on both objective truth and subjective experience. You know, it speaks to the whole human experience. It's what it's about.
That's very true. I really like that. It's the holistic.
The layer on layer. Yeah.
Layer upon layer.
Layer upon layer.
Yeah.
So if you're listening, I really encourage you to become a Christian. It's awesome.
I think until
Challenging,
you
but
try
awesome.
it, you don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one of those things. It's like,
Yeah, I tried a lot of stuff. Before I got saved,
Right.
I tried a lot of stuff.
And by stuff, you mean stuff.
Stuff.
Like everything. I tried metaphysical. I tried hallucinogenic. I tried all sorts of stuff, and certain things were kind of cool, like the rituals and everything that you go through. It seems cool at the time, but until I became a Christian, I never knew what it was to actually be in touch with that thing that I was chasing
Yeah.
after. There was nothing that even came close to it. So from personal experience, it may be subjective if you're listening, but I recommend it. Try it, you'll like it.
absolutely.
You like
Try it, you like it.
Sounds like a nice ad.
Yeah. That was a promo.
It's totally refreshing.
Just one thing to add, though. I'm sure what we've talked about, it's raised some questions for people, and maybe they want to challenge what we've said, and maybe they want to draw out some of the the little strands we've been pulling at, and so we want to encourage people to ask us those questions. I mean, that's the one thing that we keep saying is we're not scared of questions.
We welcome them.
We actually welcome them. So
Where can people drop us a line?
So help me out, yeah. You go to facebook.com/ask1.
And it's
Ask one.
Nice. I like that.
It wasn't as nice as mine.
No, it wasn't. It
No,
really
no,
wasn't.
no.
I don't do a falsetto.
Yeah.
Surely there's more we can talk about. I mean, I feel like we.
Can I just add that there is probably tons more that we can talk about on the subject, but it's also quite difficult when you're in a room with believers, because all of us believe. We believe. So it's hard. I think this episode would actually really kick in with our listeners.
Yeah, one day.
Because we kind of need them to write into us and tell us about how they feel. Because it's hard enough for us to think for them or to kind of say things, because we already believe in Jesus, and we already believe in his existence, and we already believe in the Bible.
Yeah.
Well, questions have been
Yeah.
coming in thick and fast, and we kind of been setting up our shows based on those questions. But we can move things around, and I do believe that there's going to be topics like this.
Are
That's-
we still on air?
Yes, we
We're
are.
still on air.
We stopped.
Still on air.
We stopped.
I thought we'd come to an end like ages ago.
Yeah,
No, we
it
stopped.
hasn't been. It
We-
hasn't
we
been wrapped
actually
up.
never stopped at all.
It hasn't been wrapped up.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah,
Oh,
right.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah, this is, and all that stuff was good.
Yeah.
Like all of that stuff was gold.
Yeah.
I'm going to say thank you.
So
I really thought that was it.
we've only just kind of scratched the surface on
Yeah.
this topic, and I'm very sure that the feedback that we're going to get from this episode is going to lead to another episode where we can unpack, you know,
Yeah.
the sub questions that are going to be generated around this, and we're really excited to do that. So please, if you listen to today's show, and you have any questions, send us those questions on facebook.com/ask one.
Ask one.
Nice.
Nice.
That was amazing.
Heinz,
gold.
you've lost your jingle, the position
Sorry.
of the jingle man.
Oh, that was awesome.
And Tootsie, the sound guy, thanks, man.
Back on his feet.
Back on
Always
this
a pleasure working with you.
Thanks, Toots.
Yeah, he takes this mess and turns it into something beautiful. So, thank you for being here with me. I may not be here next week. I have to do a little bit of traveling. I'm doing some research for my book that I'm writing.
We're sad. We're so
Yeah.
sad.
Yeah, if I'm not here, one of my colleagues will be here and he will be fronting the show for me, or she.
Or she.
Yes, I'm hoping it's a she.
The girls are taking over.
Yeah, go power.
You totally did not pull that off.
No, I didn't. I think you have to be a girl to pull that off.